Hello, Tanse, Etlanate, Ani, bonjour. Welcome back to our shared politics. My name is Nova. As always, I am a settler on Turtle Island. I created this podcast with the hope of highlighting our similarities instead of focusing on the differences and pushing people further apart. I wish to express acknowledgement that I am Treaty 8 territory, home to the Tetskane, Deneza, Nahiawak, Soto, and BC Métis. It is essential I recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, both status and non-status, as the guardians of these lands. As a non-Indigenous person, I play a role as a treaty partner being represented by the government. My pronouns are she, her, but I also accept they, them, and I fall under the 2S LGBTQIA+ umbrella. Okay, so this week we're going to start another little mini-series about the history of the different political parties in Canada. I'll cover the NDP today because I need a break from criticizing the cons and libs for one episode, and I need a happier episode than my last one because that was just a bummer. I'll also do one episode of the extra parties, like the Green Party and the Bloc Québécois, etc., and we'll wrap those up all in one single go. The party that we know today as the Canadian New Democrat Party, however, was officially founded in 1961. The party is actually the marriage of the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, the CCF, founded in 1932, and the Canadian Labour Congress, founded more recently in 1956. We'll start with the CCF and go through the CLC in their entireties before talking about their merger into the NDP. The Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, or CCF as I will call it from now on basically, was founded in 1932 in Calgary, Alberta. The Federation was a democratic social and social democratic party. I had to Google this, but the main difference between those two ideologies is that democratic socialists want to change the system entirely from capitalism to socialism, whereas social democrats use capitalism to their advantage and create social programs through the state. The goal of the CCF was defined as such, quote, community freed from the domination of irresponsible financial and economic power, in which all social means of production and distribution, including land, are socially owned and controlled either by voluntary organized groups of producers and consumers or, in the case of major public services and utilities and such, productive and distributive enterprises as can be conducted most efficiently when owned in common, by public corporations responsible to the people's elected representatives, end quote. Some of the founding groups were the Canadian Labour Party of Edmonton and the UFA. In 1932, the CCF had its first convention in Calgary, where they decided on the full name of Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, with Farmer Labour Socialist in brackets, and chose J.S. Woodsworth as their party leader. We're going to go on a slight tangent here and go into who James Shaver Woodsworth was. Born in Ontario in 1874, he was a Methodist minister and author. As a young man, he was a traveling minister around Manitoba before attending university. While in this role, he had worked with people in poverty, and it really began his journey into socialism. In 1916, during World War I, ministers were being asked to preach about the duty of men to serve, and Woodsworth, being a pacifist, made his objections known and was then fired from his position at the Bureau of Social Research. The next year, he had received his first pastoral post in BC before resigning from the church entirely in 1918 because of its support of the war. After leaving the church, he worked as a dock worker in BC for a while and joined a union. While touring Western Canada, he arrived in Winnipeg just in time to witness the Winnipeg General Strike and Black Saturday. The editor of a strike bulletin was arrested and charged with seditious libel, and so Woodsworth took over as editor, where he too was arrested a week later, but was released after 5 days with no charges filed. His involvement in the strike and his subsequent arrest established him as a major figure in the labor movement. Around 1920, Woodsworth helped to establish the Manitoba Independent Labour Party, where their slogan was, quote, human needs before property rights. And just the next year, he was elected as MP for his riding in Winnipeg under the banner of the Independent Labour Party. While an MP, Wordsworth pushed for electoral reform to adopt the single transferable vote for federal elections. This is basically a voting system where you rank your candidates from 1 to 3, so that if your main preferred candidate is either elected or eliminated, your vote can continue to elect someone for either prime minister or official opposition, decreasing the number of wasted votes. Obviously, this did not go through, as we're still in a first past the post system today. Wordsworth rejected violent revolution and any association with the Communist Party of Canada, and was leader of the radical Farmer and Labour Ginger Group, which was not an official federal party but instead a group of radical MPs that went on to form the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. Okay, so now we're back to Calgary 1932. During the Great Depression, Wordsworth and the ILP joined forces with those various provincial farmer, labor, and socialist groups that I had mentioned before to form the CCF, with Wordsworth becoming the first leader. In 1933, the CCF became the official opposition in BC, and in 1934 it did the same in Saskatchewan. One of the founding groups of the CCF, the UFA, was the government of Alberta at the time. The CCF was never able to become the primary party of the left, as Liberal William Lyon Mackenzie King was in power again and used his prestige to block any CCF attempts to challenge Canada's party system. On September 8, 1939, the day before Canada declared war on Nazi Germany, Wordsworth stood before Parliament and gave this speech. Quote, "I would ask, did the last war settle anything? I venture to say that it settled nothing, and the next war into which we were asked to enter, however big and bloody it may be, is not going to settle anything either. That is not the way in which settlements are brought about. While we are urged to fight for freedom and democracy, it should be remembered that war is the very negation of both. The victor may win, but if he does, it is by adopting the selfsame tactics that he condemns in his enemy. I am among a considerable number in this country who believe, and we hold it as a mature conviction, that war is the inevitable outcome of the present economic and international system with its injustices, exploitations, and class interests. I suggest that the common people of the country gain nothing by slaughtering the common people of any other country. As one who has tried for a good many years to take a stand for the common people, personally, I cannot give my consent to anything that will drag us into another war." End quote. That's some powerful words to say before Parliament. While Mackenzie King still went on to declare war, he had this to say about Wordsworth's opposition. Quote, "There are few men in this Parliament for whom I have greater respect than the leader of the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. I admire him in my heart, because time and again he has had the courage to say what lays on his conscience, regardless of what the world might think of him. A man of that caliber is an ornament to any Parliament." End quote. However, Wordsworth had essentially stood alone with his opposition to World War II, as many of his own party even supported the war. He ended up having a stroke in 1940 and could no longer perform his duties as party leader. Wordsworth wrote a letter to the CCF asking to retire, but instead they created a new position of honorary president and abolished the president position. And they basically just adopted a party leader instead of a president. In 1944, Tommy Douglas formed the first democratic socialist government in North America, becoming premier with the Saskatchewan CCF. Tommy Douglas, of course, implemented universal Medicare to Saskatchewan, which was adopted federally soon after. Thanks, socialism. And obviously, the CCF was accused of being communist more than once. The party attempted to address these concerns by toning down their manifesto and returning it to a moderate declaration instead. Regardless, the party did poorly, and this helped the party decide to merge with the Canadian Labour Congress. The CLC was formed in 1956 when the two major labour union groups in Canada converged into one union congress. The unions that were part of one of the union groups, the Trades and Labour Congress of Canada, TLC, represented workers in a specific trade, so think of like a metal workers union. The other union groups represented unions that were part of the Canadian Congress of Labour, the CCL, where all employees within a single workplace, such as a railway union, where everyone from conductors to plate layers to ticket inspectors would all fall under the general union. The traditional union is the guild type, where workers with similar or the same skills all use their collective bargaining to get better prices for everyone involved. However, as industrialization kicked in and there was a need for essential yet, quote, unskilled workers, end quote, there in turn became a need for those workers to also need collective bargaining, this time for better conditions, leading to what is known as industrial unionism. Immediately following the birth of the CLC, the CCF and the CLC began negotiations to form an alliance between organized labor and the political left in Canada. This negotiation period took a total of 5 years, where they established the new policies and principles of what would become the new party, before going on to take the name New Democratic Party in 1961. Tommy Douglas was elected the first leader of the party and led the party for 10 years. In 1971, David Lewis was elected as the new party leader, and under his leadership, the NDP supported Pierre Trudeau's minority government from 72 to 74, although the parties never entered a formal coalition, somewhat like today. Together, the two parties were able to pass several socially progressive initiatives and also created the Crown Corporation Petro-Canada, starting the process in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War. Tommy Douglas supported the creation of Petro-Canada, stating in the House of Commons, quote, "It should be remembered that the people of Canada have paid billions of dollars to enlarge and enrich foreign oil companies, and only now, belatedly, are we setting up an economic vehicle to develop our petroleum resources for the benefit of Canadians," end quote. In 1974, though, Lewis decided to work with the Progressive Conservatives to pass a motion of non-confidence, forcing an election. I don't really know what he was thinking during this time, because even if the PCs would have won, I don't see them giving much leeway to the NDP for them to pass any sort of social legislation. However, it doesn't really matter, because the plan blew up in their face and Trudeau went on to win a majority government instead, and the NDP lost half its seats in the House. Lewis even ended up losing in his own riding and resigned as leader with his tail tucked between his legs. Ed Broadbent, who just passed away actually on January 11th of 2024, won leadership of the NDP, and in the 1979 election brought their seat count from 17 to 26, before further bringing their seat count up in the 1980 election from 26 to 32 seats. Trudeau again approached the leader of the NDP and asked to form a coalition, to which Broadbent declined. When Trudeau stepped down before the 1984 election, leaving leadership of the Liberals to John Turner, in which he lost the election to the Conservative Brian Mulroney, the NDP finished with 30 seats, just 10 shy behind John Turner and the Liberals. In 1987, Broadbent became the first NDP leader who took the party to first place in public opinion polling, and some predicted the NDP could become the official opposition to the PCs. However, in the 1988 election, Broadbent was only able to secure 43 seats, leaving the NDP in third place yet again. At the NDP Winnipeg convention that year, Broadbent stepped down, leaving leadership open. During the NDP leadership election, there was major debate over whether the federal party should be more focused on Western Canada alienation or Quebec separatism. In the end, the party decided to concern itself with the Western Canadian issues and aligned itself with the no side for the referendum for Quebec separation, causing several internal clashes between MPs. Audrey McLaughlin secured leadership of the NDP in 1989, and she was the one who brought them into the 1993 election, during which the NDP saw a major upset, losing 34 seats and only able to secure 9 seats total. This caused the NDP to lose their official federal party status, as they needed to secure 12 seats in the House of Commons. From what I understand, losing official party status means that you are not able to access public funds for research, staff salaries, or any other purposes, and the MPs begin to operate as independents, meaning they lose some privileges in debates and during question period. Independents are also not entitled to receive copies of government notices of motion or amendments to bills and such. However, as an independent, you can still be appointed to committees, introduce certain bills, make comments, and ask questions to other party MPs, put written questions forward to the Speaker of the House, and raise points of order. One of the reasons for the major loss of seats was that by 1993, the facade that was Brian Mulroney had lost its glimmer, and many Canadians became staunchly anti-Mulroney NPCs. Many voters who had previously voted NDP chose to vote Liberal in that election to ensure that the PCs would be defeated and at least a left-leaning party would be elected. This was the election where the PCs also lost official party status, being reduced to only 2 seats total. Bloc Québécois was the official opposition and soon announced that Blocist MPs would only speak French on the floor of the House of Commons, a policy that still remains today. This was out of necessity, as many of the MPs who had been elected could not speak English well enough to debate in parliamentary settings. Although Audrey McLaughlin won her seat in Yukon, she still stepped down as the leader of the NDP, and Alexa McDonough was elected leader in 1995. In the 1997 election, her first as leader of the party, they were able to win 21 seats, regaining their official party status. However, there was again much internal strife amongst MPs, with 2 MPs even crossing the floor, one to join the PCs in 1999 and the other joining the Liberal Party in 2000, prior to the election that year, during which the NDP were only able to win 13 seats, just one more than necessary to keep that official party status that they had only just regained in the prior election. Many caucus members called for a new leader as they believed McDonough to be too centrist and that the NDP was moving towards the center of the political spectrum. McDonough announced her resignation in 2002, citing family reasons, and was succeeded by Jack Layton. Jack Layton had attempted to gain entry to the House of Commons through 3 elections, but was unsuccessful each time. And so when he took over as the NDP leader in early 2003, he didn't actually have access to Parliament. In Canadian tradition, the elected leader of a party would ask an MP to step down in order for him to gain a chance to enter Parliament. However, Layton did not choose to do so and instead appointed the MP that he had won against in the leadership election as deputy leader, making him the parliamentary leader of the NDP in the meantime. In the 2004 election, Layton had hoped to win 40 seats in the House, but was only able to secure just shy of half that prediction, securing 19 seats in the election. The NDP was especially disappointed to see that its 2 Saskatchewan MPs had been defeated by Conservatives, meaning the party had been shut out in Saskatchewan. Exit polls after the 2004 election indicated that many previous NDP voters had again chosen to vote Liberal to keep the newly formed Conservative Party out of Canada. The Liberals were able to use fear tactics to convince NDP voters that a split in the left could hand the reunited Conservative Party an easy win, which worked in the favor of the Liberal Party as they were able to keep power. However, this time it was as minority government. As the sponsorship scandal was being uncovered and the Liberals were in a precarious position, the NDP used this to their advantage and agreed to not topple the government as long as some concessions were made in the budget. The major change that the NDP made to the budget was taking $4.5 billion that was being planned for corporate tax cuts and instead routed it to social, educational, and environmental programs instead. That is a perfect example for Conservatives and Liberals alike to remember. Just because additional programs are being implemented or given additional funding does not automatically mean we need to see an increase in our taxes. Our politicians just need to give enough of a shit not to just hand our money over to corporations. If capitalism works so well, those corporations shouldn't need socialist systems to keep them afloat. They are literally receiving federal handouts in the billions of dollars, yet the single mom on social assistance is the problem? Okay. On November 9th, 2005, when further reports were released about the extent of the sponsorship scandal, Layton told the Liberals that the NDP support would only continue if a ban was passed on private healthcare in Canada. The Liberals refused. A few weeks later, Harper put forward a motion of non-confidence, which was seconded by Layton and forced an election. In January 2006, the NDP won 29 seats and the party was reaching the popularity level it had seen under Ed Broadbent's leadership. Finally. Later that year, Thomas Mulcair was elected in a by-election in Quebec and became the 30th NDP MP in Parliament. This marked the second time ever and the first time in 17 years that the NDP had won any single riding in Quebec. In the 2008 election, the party had won 37 seats and had a breakthrough win in Edmonton Strathcona, again only the second time in NDP history that they were able to win a seat in Alberta this time. In February of 2010, Jack Layton announced he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. With the announcement, he noted that his father had suffered from the same type of cancer 17 years earlier and had recovered, and his wife, the now mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, had also recovered from thyroid cancer. He vowed that he would beat his cancer and would not allow it to interrupt his duties as an MP or as a leader of the NDP. In the federal election of May 2011, Jack Layton and his NDP were able to become official opposition for the first time in Canadian history. The upturn began in Quebec, where the NDP was in first place and where they were in second place nationally, only polling a few points behind the Conservatives. This was dubbed the Orange Crush in the media as progressive non-conservatives bolstered behind the NDP as they lost faith in the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals nationally. The NDP returned to Parliament with a whopping 103 seats, 59 of which came from Quebec alone. In contrast, the Liberals had only been able to secure 34 seats after their previous 77, and the Bloc lost their official party status, being reduced to 4 seats only. For the first time, the NDP was seen as a real contender in the Canadian political atmosphere and became the main non-conservative party. I really hope we can see this happen again as more and more Liberals are disillusioned with Justin Trudeau in the coming months leading up to our next election. Just 2 months after this historic win for the NDP, in late July 2011, Jack Layton announced he was suffering from a new form of cancer, which he never actually was able to clarify what it was, but it was thought to have been his prostate cancer metastasizing into bone cancer or lymphoma. This time he did take a leave from office, but made it known that he was hoping to return to Parliament when the House of Commons resumed in September that year. Unfortunately, Jack Layton passed away on August 22nd, 2011, never returning to his post. Just months after seeing the NDP become official opposition and win 103 seats in Parliament, he passed away. That's so fucked up. All across Canada, there were many remembrance gatherings and impromptu memorials set up. On the night following his funeral, the CN Tower and Niagara Falls were lit in orange, the color of the NDP, from sunset to sunrise in honor of Jack Layton. A leadership election was called in March 2012, honoring the call made in Jack Layton's final letter to his party. Thomas Mulcair won leadership, and he immediately set to task, traveling to Washington, D.C. to lobby against the Keystone XL pipeline and instead promoted the creation of a pipeline to Canadian East Coast refineries. In late 2012, a scandal was uncovered in which a few Canadian senators were claiming travel and living expenses that they were ineligible to receive. During this, the NDP took the chance to reassert its long-standing position that the Senate should be abolished. Mulcair said, quote, "Unelected party hacks have no place writing or rewriting the laws of this country. It's as simple as that. The Liberals, when they were in power, and now the Conservatives have fostered a culture of entitlement when it comes to their Senate appointments. It's hard to be a place of sober second thought when you are drunk with entitlement and power." End quote. Pierre Poilievre, who was ironically the Minister of Democratic Reform at the time, partially agreed with Mulcair, saying, quote, "Canadians understand that our Senate, as it stands today, must either change or, like the old upper houses of our provinces, vanish." End quote. Funny, don't see him mentioning democratic reform now or electoral reform or anything like that. After the scandal, the NDP were pulling ahead of everyone, even the majority government Conservatives. However, after the Liberals elected Justin Trudeau in 2013, the NDP started on a fast decline. Another round of Trudeau mania. Ooh. Olivia Chow decided to run, unsuccessfully, as mayor of Toronto in 2014, leaving her seat open in the House of Commons, resulting in a by-election where the Liberals were able to take the seat from the NDP. Come on, Olivia Chow. Come on, girl. In 2014, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that an abolition of the Senate would require the consent of all 10 provinces, of which only Saskatchewan had agreed to the abolition, and the topic has not gone any further since. Basically, none of the provinces cared. The Premier Brad Wall at the time was like, if you can get other people on board, I'll agree too, but I'm not going to waste my time essentially trying to abolish the Senate. And ever since then, it's just kind of gone off the wayside. By May 2015, leading into the federal election, the polls were showing a recovery for the NDP, which was partially due to the party opposing the Conservatives' Bill C-51, which was the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2015, which the Liberals had agreed to support, and also partially due to the historic win for the Alberta NDP that year. The federal NDP were able to push through its bill abolishing the tampon tax on menstrual hygiene products and also attempted to get another bill passed, banning the use of pay-to-pay fees charged by banks. But the Conservatives oddly blocked that on the House floor. This pay-to-pay fee refers to banks charging fees to pay mortgages, loans, and debit transactions. Something that would have benefited every single Canadian, but would have cost only a loss in profits for the banks. In September 2015, a political manifesto called the LEAP Manifesto was released by a collective of environmentalists, Indigenous, labor, and faith leaders, authors, and artists. On the day of its release, it attracted more than 10,000 signatories. The 15 points included in the LEAP Manifesto are as follows. 1. Fully implementing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, also known as UNDRIP. 2. A shift to a 100% clean energy economy by 2050. 3. A moratorium on new fossil fuel infrastructure projects. 4. Support for community-owned clean energy projects. 5. A universal program for energy efficiency and retrofitting, prioritizing low-income communities. 6. High-speed rail and affordable nationwide public transit. 7. Retraining and resource workers for carbon-intensive industries. 8. A national infrastructure renewal program. 9. An overhaul of the agricultural industry, prioritizing local production. 10. A moratorium on international trade deals that infringe upon democratic rights. 11. Immigration status and full legal protection for all workers, including immigrants and refugees. 12. Investment in expanding low-carbon sectors of the economy, including through the development of a national childcare program. 13, a vigorous debate on the implementation of a universal basic income. 14, an end to austerity and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, paid for with cuts to military spending and robust progressive wealth and corporate taxation. And 15, an end to corporate funding of political campaigns and examination of voting reform. Okay, so those are basically pretty good. Thomas Mulcair was only able to secure 44 seats during the election, losing 59. He received heavy criticism from his caucus, who felt as though he had run on too moderate of a platform again, and thus the Liberals were able to promote themselves as the primary party of the left again. About 6 months after the election, at the NDP party convention in Edmonton, Alberta, Mulcair was criticized for what was seen as implicit support for the LEAP manifesto, which was seen as an economic threat to Alberta's oil industry and thus a political threat to Rachel Notley's Alberta NDPs. A confidence vote was held against Mulcair, and with 52% of his caucus voting against him, it was decided that a new leadership election would be held within 2 years. However, they did ask Mulcair to stay on as party leader in the meantime. 2 years later, in 2017, Jagmeet Singh was elected to lead the NDP party, becoming the first person of a visible minority to lead a major Canadian federal party permanently. Going into the 2019 federal election, early polling was suggesting that the party was at risk of losing official party status yet again, and even possibly being eclipsed by the Green Party. The NDP did lose a seat to a Green Party MP in a by-election, and Mulcair's loss of his seat in Quebec to a Liberal MP showed that the party was close to being wiped out in the province entirely. The NDP was only able to win in 24 ridings in the 2019 election, its worst result since 2004. The NDP saw massive losses in Quebec with only one MP retaining their seat. The Prairies also saw massive swaps to the Conservatives, and the party was completely shut out of Toronto again. However, a bit of good news was that they were able to retain their one singular seat in Alberta. A resurgence of the Bloc Québécois saw the NDP take fourth place again, but they were able to keep the balance of power as the Liberals had only won a minority government. After the 2019 election, COVID-19 began. The NDP was able to use their leverage to pressure the Liberals to hand out financial aid and to extend that CERB program in the autumn of 2020. In June of 2020, Jagmeet Singh was kicked out of the House of Commons when he refused to apologize for calling a Bloc Québécois MP a racist. He was seeking unanimous consent in the House to pass a motion to, quote, recognize the systemic racism within the RCMP and call on the government to review the RCMP budget as well as the federal law that governs the police force, end quote. It seemed like all the parties were going to side with the motion until an audible no came from the Bloc Québécois caucus. Singh and the MP then exchanged words before the Bloc Québécois party whip called on the speaker for order, saying that the NDP leader had used unparliamentary language and insulted her colleague. Singh then rose and said in French, quote, it's true, I called him a racist, end quote. The speaker asked Singh to apologize, to which he obviously refused and was then asked to leave. When asked by reporters about the event, Singh said, quote, in this moment where Indigenous people are being killed and being brutalized, Black people are being killed and brutalized in Canada. We've not seen any action. And in that moment, we put forward this motion. But I thought, given where we are, given what's going on, given the lack of action, here's something we can do concretely to actually make a difference. I'm just kind of shocked that anyone would say no to this motion, end quote. The Bloc Québécois party whip attempted to save face by saying her party supported the idea of a study into systemic racism in the RCMP, but would not agree to it before a review was done. In 2021, Justin Trudeau requested the Governor General to dissolve Parliament and call a new election, which was granted. He was seemingly hoping to regain a majority government, which he had lost in 2019, and thought a snap election was the best way to do it in the middle of a pandemic. In my opinion, this was incredibly stupid, and according to Elections Canada, cost Canadians an estimated $616.8 million, or approximately $22.42 for each registered voter. The 2019 election had cost only $500 million. Why, in 2 years, was there more than a $115 million increase? Because of all of the pandemic protocols that had to be followed, of course. I think the most infuriating part is that essentially nothing changed from the 2019 election in terms of MPs in the House of Commons. The Liberals gained a mere 3 seats, while the Conservatives lost 2. The Bloc Québécois stayed at their same amount, and the NDP gained 1 seat in Alberta, marking that 2 seats in the province, while the Green Party lost 1 seat. In the end, taxpayers footed the bill for a very expensive game of musical chairs. On March 22, 2022, Justin Trudeau decided to ask the NDP to begin a supply and confidence agreement. This was influenced by the Freedom Convoy and the Russia-Ukraine war. The NDP agreed with some terms attached. That the government would, by the end of 2023, implement pharmacare and by the beginning of 2025, implement a dental care program for low-income Canadians. In December, we saw the Liberals and NDP agree to push negotiations on pharmacare until at least March of this year, while they rolled out certain eligibility criteria for dental care, beginning with seniors over the age of 87 first, before having just opened to seniors 77 and above, and so on and so forth. By May 2024, all low-income Canadians over the age of 65 will have access, with disabled adults as well as children under the age of 18 beginning in June 2024. They're hoping to have it rolled out to all remaining low-income Canadians by 2025, which is a huge bonus and will add better quality of life to millions of Canadians' lives. I believe the low-income threshold is $90,000. So that basically brings us up to today with the NDP and their background. They've had some ups and downs, but maybe not as many as the party we're going to be discussing next week. Tune in then to hear more about it. As always, thank you for joining me today. I drop a new episode every Monday morning at midnight, so check in back next week to see what I'll be sharing with you then. If you learned something new today, it'd be awesome if you'd click that button and follow along for next time. Or if you'd like to contact me with feedback, you can email me at oursharedpodcast@gmail.com. See you later, alligator.